I noticed that the exact angles for the first pyramid at the center turns out to be 51.85 degrees. And then I noticed that the next angles for the perfect fifth and the perfect fourth, turned out to be 53.13 degrees. And then I noticed that for the next one, the angle for the major third and the minor sixth turned out to be 51.34 degrees. Well, those three angles happen to be the precise angles of all three pyramids on the Giza Plateau.
Whoa.
Exactly. If they were off 0.0001, it wouldn't work.
Oh yeah, total download.
You
and I are getting massively different downloads. Like my little pea brain, they're like, don't worry, we're not gonna give you fractions, you know?
Robert Edward Grant on the Quite Frankly podcast.
And then you go into the King's Chamber, you lay in the sarcophagus and you do the same note. And then it goes wah, 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 like this loud engine. It turns on.
In the King's Chamber?
In the King's Chamber. And it's loud.
Well, astrologically, 2020 was a massive year, and the next one is 2024.
24 is a divine number. Well, 24 also relates to 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1 equals 10, but 4 times 3 times 2 times 1 equals 24. 24 is this 24,000 year cycle. So the knowledge of our 24,000 year cycle and how it actually operates and how the past becomes the future and the future becomes the past in this cyclical time is going to be coming to our mass awareness. That represents the entry into the fifth dimension, which is represented by the throat chakra, the fifth chakra, the throat chakra, which is represented by the Giza Plateau.
Wow.
So what's gonna happen in 2024? A massive solar flare, many believe.
And what you can start doing today.
Can people get this now?
And I'm very happy to let you know, you're the first to hear this, that
ever since I wrote my goals down with the pen, my dreams and reality have both been blending in. I just hope that in the end, my debt don't extend me on my dividends.
Congrats on your podcast. It's been such a joy to watch it.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been quite a labor of love, actually, and it's become something so much more than I ever thought it would become, to be honest.
So intuitive that you would say that, because my first question is to ask you, do you feel like your podcast is part of your awakening process in life?
You know what? It's actually a continuation of many steps, a series of softenings, I would say, in the heart and the combination of the heart-mind consciousness that led me to want to share. You know, people started asking me, why did you start sharing things on Instagram? When did you start, building your social media profile? It was not that I was ever trying to build my social media profile. What it was I felt the need to share what I was experiencing so that it wasn't even necessarily for other people, to be honest. It was so that it would embed within me more. So I was just sharing it because through sharing the information, I found that the principles of it actually got deeper and deeper embedded within my own consciousness. And that awakening continued to then just have natural extensions. And the podcast was a natural extension of that same process of awakening. I was having very interesting conversations with people like yourself. And I thought, why not share these conversations with other people, which then will embed more deeply within me? Because one of the things I learned through this whole process is that what I perceived previously as being separate from me is not actually separate from me at all. It's just a reflection of me. And so if you start to love the world around you, right, and no longer judge the world around you, what that really does is allow the perfect pathway to be able to experience true self-love.
Are you noticing, and I'm asking because it's happening with me, where I'm noticing these little synchronicities, right? So for example, and I'm talking about specifically around the podcast, because of course synchronicities in my life, constant, right? But in the podcast, to the point where, like, I was in Austin a week ago, and I'm talking to this guy at like a health food store. He's in the front desk. He's a kid. He was like 22 years old, but he's in a band, and he's talking about his inspiration was Led Zeppelin and the Beatles and all these like older, bands. He was like, "What do you think about this whole, 432 HC and like all that stuff?" And I was like, I don't know. I believe it. Like, I think that if things are tuned, I listen to binaural beats. I don't know if they're doing anything, but I feel good. And I said, "What about you as a musician?" And he's like, I think that as a guitarist, when I tune it to 440 or whatever, he's like, it actually does sound better. And I was like, well, is it that you were trained for it to sound better? Or so we had this whole conversation. That night, I get home, or to my Airbnb, and I get on YouTube, and you're talking about frequencies. It was like a suggested video. And then now, a week later, you're in front of me, and I get to ask you in person. So that's how I'm saying is like everything around the podcast is tying in together, and I feel like it's part of, selfishly, my awakening, but also the awakening of whoever's watching it, and it's just like lending itself. Do you want to talk about the 432 and all this?
Sure. But on the subject of synchronicities,
Yeah.
just coming here to your place, I already had 3 synchronicities.
I love that.
Right, literally just coming here. The first one
What were
was walking in and seeing your little pyramid over here that you use for Kriya Yoga.
Yeah.
And it happens to be the exact proportions of what I would call the, it's related to the 5, 12, 13 triangle, which is the perfect triangle. And it's the one that is importantly relative to something called the philosopher's stone. So it's fascinating that you've got it here. Because that's been very, very top of mind for me, and it's made of copper for those that can't see it. But secondly, you showed me your Emmys. And one of the things that I've been talking about and forgot about it for quite some time, it hadn't really been top of mind until I did this podcast with Matthias Di Stefano, where I talked about going to the pyramid in 2017 in October and being there with 175 people, and then the number of people that ended up getting shot at the fake pyramid on the same day in Las Vegas was 1 over that number.
Is that right?
Yeah, so it's 571 people. Wow. And I was there in Egypt with 175, and 1 over 175 is 0.5, 0.0571 or 0.0571. And which is interesting because how can that be, right? It's kind of this weird reflection, mirror of consciousness, and then I walk in and you show me your Emmy, and it basically is for the coverage that you did on the shooting in 2017, which is like really weird. And then the third thing was I was listening just a few days ago to Shaka Khan.
No way.
Yes.
And then her fragrance that she gave me when I had her on.
I always love the song, it's sort of like a old school, song. And then you're like, oh, and then I got this from Shaka Khan, this microphone that looks like it's a microphone, but it's actually
it's a fragrance
bottle, right? Fragrance bottle.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, all 3 of those were synchronicities for me. So I know I'm in the right place.
Yeah. See,
And
I look at
so
the world
random,
just like you.
No one talks to me about Shaka Khan.
Right.
No one talks to me about, this mirror image of the pyramid where I had this very, very profound awakening in myself. And then it's actually the one you got an Emmy for, which is like,
wild.
What the heck, right?
Yeah.
So we're dancing around this mirror of our own consciousness. And the way that our subconscious mind speaks to us is through numbers and through synchronicities and through things that are sort of like matrix glitches. And then that, okay, this is sort of like another little check mark that this is the right direction.
And I feel like us noticing it is that whole thing of like Jesus would say, like, be in the world but not of the world, right?
Yes.
It's kind of like we're part of it, we're in it, but we also recognize it. Yeah.
So on to the question of 432.
Yeah.
So 432 is a very important number. It has so many implications for our life around us. So for example, the speed of light will take a square root of its value, which is 186,000 miles per second, right? If you take the square root of that, the closest perfect square to that is 432. Okay, so that's just one thing. The radius of the sun is 432,000 miles.
Wow.
Right, the radius of Jupiter is about 43,200 miles, so it's 10 times smaller than the sun. The number of seconds that we have in a day, right, is 86,400, which is 2 times 43,200.
Wow.
Okay, so if you could make a perfect time system, think about it, you probably have it be somehow related to the orbital around the sun, and maybe the sun's diameter even. The sun's diameter is 864,000 miles. The number of seconds in one day is 86,400. It's kind of too perfect.
Man, what does all that mean though for somebody watching, right? Like,
what it means is that not only the things that we think of and register as synchronicities, our entire universe around us is a synchronicity. And everything that we perceive as being random and no longer, not having a pattern at all associated with it, is simply our inability to perceive the higher pattern that is all that is.
Wow.
Everything is pattern. It's just we are not in a high enough dimension to be able to perceive all of the patterns. And as we awaken, the series of softenings takes us through this cycle and process where we start to register all of these things and remember that we created it. And we left these little synchronicities for ourselves.
Yeah.
And we're watching it play backwards. And we call that forward time.
I was in an ayahuasca ceremony. This is like a few years ago. Actually, it's where I met, I think you know, Blue of Earth.
Blue of Earth, oh yeah, very good
This
friend.
is like 4 years ago. We met at an ayahuasca
She's
ceremony
coming
in
to Egypt
Mexico.
with me in a few weeks.
Oh yeah? Okay, wait, I have a lot of questions about that Egypt trip, so we're gonna get to that. I literally, in that ceremony, saw myself as a microphone, a speaker. And I didn't, and this goes back to the synchronicity. And I, at the time, didn't know what it was trying to tell me. A speaker, I thought, oh, maybe I'm supposed to be a voice for plant medicine and share that, you know, which I've done a little bit on YouTube. But now from this podcast, I realize what an important thing this is. Not just that I do it, but people like you, people like Blue, you know, all these people who are now Andre, to share like that message of somebody might see 432 and not think much about it, and then they see your video, or maybe they've thought about philosopher's stone like you mentioned about the pyramid. Now what I'm going to do tonight is probably go down a rabbit hole of philosopher's stone and to see what you've said about it. But it's like the little breadcrumbs that we left. I wonder why. Maybe you know, I have an idea from like the yugas in Hinduism of where we're at right now in that stage, but why are we just now starting to find those breadcrumbs?
I think it's probably preempting where you were going to go to. And it actually does relate to the same 432. And I'll come back to that question because I didn't really fully answer your question on that. And why 432 is so important. I believe we are at the end of this cycle, right? And the Kali Yuga. Right? And we're going into a new cycle. It does relate and coincide with the age of Aquarius and Aquarian enlightenment. We're meant to wake up right now. We're literally meant to wake up. We're meant to be triggered by these things. And we've been in a sleep stage, right, for a long time, for 2,000 years, in fact. And probably even longer, you could argue, even much longer than that. So you could say that, what we think of as our distant future could also be our distant past. And our distant past could be our distant future, therefore.
Wow.
So we're in a cycle of time. It's the grand play, the hero's journey. And we are intended to fall asleep during parts of it, and we're intended to wake up in others. And part of that awakening includes 432, because 432 is based on this concept of the tetractys, the Pythagorean tetractys. So Pythagoras was in the 6th century BC, lived on the island of Samos, and he lived in Egypt for 30 years, in fact, studied the Egyptian mystery schools. And he gave us several things, and a lot of people think, well, we already knew trigonometry before Pythagoras because there's proof of it in something called Plimpton 322. It's a cuneiform plate that had all these right triangle relationships embedded within it that was 1,500 years older than when Pythagoras was here. So, why is Pythagoras getting all this credit for having done that? Well, it's very simple, because he kept very good records. It wasn't necessarily that he was the first to come up with these things. He may not have even known that other people had come up with it before him, but that's the thing with truth and knowledge, right? It comes from this Akashic field. I don't believe that anything that I pull in from this Akashic field is owned by me. I don't believe knowledge is something that can be owned by anyone, per se.
I saw you say that about your patents, too.
Yeah, I have many patents, approaching 80 some odd patents now. I don't feel like I own anything. It wasn't mine to own. It's just part of coming out in the timeline that's meant to come out, and I'm just a receptacle, and other people would also be receptacles of similar type information. The reason I file patents is so that I'm not banned from using the technology. It's not so I can assert the technology. I've never once asserted a patent against anyone, right? It's not the way that I believe that this is meant to be. It's like whenever I discover new mathematics, I don't feel like I own it. And I know that it's a rediscovery because everything can only be a rediscovery. I just said that we live in a movie that's already made, and we're probably watching it play backwards and calling it forward time, right? So from that perspective, if you look at 432, it's unique because it ties to this tetractys, which is a triangle. And if you could imagine all numbers starting from 2 to the power of n, so it would be 2 to the second power, 2 to the third power, 2 to the fourth power, 2 to the fifth power, 2 to the sixth power. And that's going to create one side of this triangle. So 2 to the second power is 4, 2 to the third power is 8, 2 to the fourth power is 16, 2 to the fifth power is 32, and then it goes 32, 64, 128, 256,
God, the way your mind works.
512, 1024, 4096. And these are binary numbers that we think of. So every time you hear about types of encryption on computers, they're always in terms of binary numbers. And so the number of binary digits would be the number of ones and zeros that would associate with a particular number. And it's generally, compared to a decimal number, 3.32 times as many digits. So if you have like a 128-bit number, you could basically divide it by 3, and that would be the number of decimal digits that it would be. If you had 128 ones and zeros next to each other, that would be 128-bit. Take that down by 2/3, and you're going to have approximately the number of decimal digits that would represent. So effectively what this does, when you create this doubling sequence, it goes 2, 4, and then the next power it goes to 8, then 16, so 8 doubles 16, 16 doubles 32. It's like an octave. See how it's basically going up? Octaves are doubling the frequency. So if you had 432 and you want to double its frequency, it goes to 864, and that would be another note. So 432 is an A note, 864 would be the next octave up of A. Okay? So the binary doubling sequence mirrors and matches music. Okay, because it's doubling and creating octaval representations, right, across this gigantic electromagnetic spectrum. You could think of everything we see around us as just a huge piano keyboard. So everything we see is limited by what our eyes can see. There are certain birds that would see so many other colors that we cannot see, right? It's one of the memes that I like to put out on social media, because to a bird, another bird has all these other colors
I've seen that
we can't even register or recognize, right? So we're seeing a tiny aspect of the visible spectrum, which is only less than 1% of the overall electromagnetic spectrum.
Wow.
Well, the same thing is true for sound. You could go from 27 hertz is probably the lowest frequency sound you could hear. It would be a very, very low frequency note, right? It would be below the piano keyboard, and you wouldn't even notice it. But I could play it, and if I played the right notes, a diminished fifth, I could put you in a fearful state. I could also put you in a happy state, and you wouldn't even hear it. It's totally inaudible to you.
Do you think that's used around the world?
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. There is sound warfare that happens all the time.
Wow.
And there's actually very prominent stories about it. Americans that were stationed at the U.S. Embassy were basically attacked in China.
I saw
with
this.
sound warfare, and the same thing happened to them in Cuba as well. And it's a very well documented story that is very well recognized by mainstream as well.
What about on a day-to-day basis? Do you think they're using it to control or no?
So who's doing the controlling?
Right, yeah.
I think ultimately it all comes back to us and the experience we wanted to experience, right? So it's not like I sit here and say, oh yeah, these people were doing this to me. On the one hand, we could see the whole thing with COVID as being, oh, these people were against us, they were trying to kill us and screw us over and everything. But maybe because we were all stuck at home, that was probably the mass awakening.
Yep. Well, astrologically, 2020 was a massive year, and the next one is 2024, which I know.
Yeah, next year of the dragon.
Oh yeah.
It's gonna be a big one, and I think all the intuitives and channelers are feeling that big time. I'm feeling
it massively. Yeah.
I'm feeling it massively, and I think so it's not necessarily that there's somebody else. It's all just aspects of
the collective experience.
And I think that's what's important about this particular point in time, is that we're going through this transitionary period between, the yugas into another yuga experience, which is entirely different. It's like the set's changing, the backdrop's changing. It's kind of like a stage play where, there's a long intermission, and then there's going to be this whole thing. And maybe the intermission was triggered by COVID and staying home for a couple of years. So all of these things that we think are negative aspects to us might actually be through the benefit of the philosopher's stone, which is really, most importantly and metaphorically, changing our perception of what has happened and occurred to us. We often think the world just happens to us. But what if we start to realize that everything that happened to us was selected by us? We start asking the question, why did I choose this when something tough happens to us? And then you start learning the lessons that you intended to learn. That then changes the lead of that experience, those difficult times, into gold. Because you start realizing those things that happened to me weren't really the worst thing that ever happened after all. Maybe in point of fact, with the benefit of retrospective looking back on it, you recognize that it's actually the best thing that ever happened to you. That actually changes and transmutes your history. Your emotional state changes. And the collective of all of the emotional perspectives, right, that people feel is maybe what feeds what we call space-time memory in the first place. And it's the feeling of those things and being able to transmute them and recognize them for the beauty that they are, even the struggle, even the difficulty, even the suffering. That's turning lead into gold. That's what I believe the true value of Philosopher's Stone is.
Hey, did you know that you're walking around like a radio tower, just broadcasting out these messages and frequencies on a subconscious level? And some of those broadcasts are negative, and they could be affecting the way people see you, the way people treat you. Did you also know that you're never upset for the reason that you think you're upset? We're also walking around with these trapped emotions, trapped old traumas from things that have happened to us in our past. And that's what I clear for people when they come and work with me one-on-one. We look for the subconscious blocks that are affecting you, and I clear them. Most people report the next day, if not that same day, they feel lighter, they feel happier, they feel free. And a lot of times you can check out the testimonials on my website to see people resolve physical illnesses and physical traumas like restless leg syndrome, eye pressure problems, cold feet, cold hands, anxiety. All of these things are things that I've seen get cleared when people work with me. It's all done on an energetic level. And the best part is that it's done remotely from the comfort of your home. We just get on a Zoom call, and in 30 minutes, you can experience what feels like 10 years of therapy. So if you're curious, go to www.frankelaridi.com, and I cannot wait to work with you.
You know, someone who's really ascended, they can be walking across the street and someone could scream obscenities at them and they are not fazed by it at all. That's what it means to be ascended. That's an ascended mindset, because you actually look at it from a different standpoint and say, you know, all of these things that are happening to me, and it's not gaslighting and it's not spiritual bypassing. All these things that are happening to me are happening for a reason. My job is to find out why I chose it. And that's a powerful thing. So, you know, going back to 432, I talked about the doubling sequence on one side. On the other side, it's 3 to the n. So 2 to the n and 3 to the n.
This is specifically the Philosopher's Stone
shape? So if you're
Okay.
making it, it could be an equilateral triangle or the Philosopher's Stone shape. Both work. So 2 to the n and 3 to the n. And then when you do this, it ends up right at the center coming out of this triangle being 216. That's where those two things overlap.
So half of 432.
Yep, half of 432. So 432 is right bang in the center. So what does this actually mean? Because actually 216 would be then just a radius value of a circle that had a diameter of 432. So think of that as a center point. Now you draw that circle and it's going around the tetractys triangle, and that's giving us also a Philosopher's Stone because it's right bang in the center. And that is what the Philosopher's Stone looks like. It's the circle, right, with the triangle inscribed within it, and then within that, another square and a circle inscribed within that. So when you start to think about it, you realize, wait a minute, all these things that have been happening to me, I thought were tough and difficult, are actually great blessings. It's all in how we look at the world. The universe isn't happening to us. When we look at it from an enlightened and a higher order perspective, you realize that the universe is happening for us.
It's all perfect.
And it's all perfect exactly as it is. Everyone will choose their perfect timing to awaken to that. It's like some people choose to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. Other people choose to wake up at 7 or 8.
Yeah, it's all perfect.
It's all perfect, right? It's not judging one for not waking up earlier.
For sure, yeah.
Right? It's just not. There's no
And even
point in
staying
it.
asleep, like if you don't want to be enlightened, that's fine too. Great. Enjoy the dream, have fun. You're having a blast. Like I'm at a point now where I'm ready for like God realization. I want the next thing. But yeah, like I never would look at somebody, even like a drug addict or whatever, who's just like wasting their life away in quotes. like, great, that's your life path. Maybe that's what's going to lead to you being a saint in the next life. We
They're
need you
God
to go
too.
through this.
Every one of us is.
For
People ask
sure.
me, is God like this old man type thing? No. God is everything around you that you can perceive, including yourself. And if you think that the rest of the world, if you can grasp the concept that the rest of the world is God, but you're not still somehow, that's ego.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Have you heard of A Course in Miracles?
Oh, yeah.
It's my number one teaching in life. And I forgot about it over the last 5 years, and now it just keeps popping up in front of me, and it's so cool how that's happening. But one of my favorite things about that is it says exactly what you just said. It's arrogant to think that you're not the light of the world, because God has already, it says, use this Christic terminology, it says God has already declared you as that. So to say you're not is arrogant. To say you are the light of the world is humble, because it means that you're accepting the function that you were made to have.
You can always tell the people that are truly humble because they never perceive arrogance.
Yeah.
Think about it. We don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are. So the people that complain about other people being whatever it is that they're complaining about are actually just pointing out the things that they don't like about themselves.
Yeah.
If you spot it, that means you've got it. So one of the things I love to do is whenever I feel tempted to judge somebody or something, I try to stop myself and to think for a second, okay, first of all, why am I triggered? What's the reason? Why did I choose this? And then I stop another thing and say, I am that I am. The thing that I was going to judge about another person, I actually take it and say, I am not aware of the fact that I am this thing, and that's why I've judged it so harshly that it's now out of my persona and in the world around me. So the things we don't like about ourselves, we tend to push them out of ourselves. And then they pop up in the world around us, and we just think that's happenstance.
Yeah, exactly. No, we're here. It's like this is a school, right?
This is a school.
We're in the curriculum.
We are in a spiritual life simulation game that learns through experience, not by didactic training, the most important principles in the universe. Because think about it. If you could access all knowledge and wisdom in the universe simply by raising your frequency and tapping into an Akashic field of information, you don't really need schools, but the only type of school that you would absolutely benefit from would be experience. The school of experience, the school that would teach you how to love and how to be loved. Despite all of the things around us, despite all the duality around us, to realize that it's about loving and being loved, right? And I believe enlightenment is really truly when we decide to express love in a way that supersedes our desire for an objective truth. Realizing that there's no such thing as an objective truth. There's only the way that you could gain a path of wisdom would be to accumulate all possible subjective perspectives of whatever the thing is you're trying to observe. And maybe that's what this universe actually is. Maybe it is the universe observing itself through each of our unique eyes of conditioning bias that then allow the universe to truly be a lover of wisdom and a philomath, one that is constantly learning and growing by adding more and more perspectives of that truth. It's no longer fact, it's facet of a prism, a larger prism of truth. So when you look at this, it actually relates to 432, because the entire aspect of the Philosopher's Stone, all of it relates back to 432 as well. So there's a pyramid in a place called Abu Rawash. I'm going to visit there again. I was there a few months ago. And it has a base length of 86.4 feet. So 864, which is already kind of interesting. And you might be saying, well, wait, the Egyptians didn't they use the cubit? They didn't use the foot. No, they actually used all three measurement systems. We know this because even the king's chamber happens to be exactly pi times 10 meters.
I saw your thing on that. Oh my God.
It's perfect.
I sent it to so many people. I mean, it's fascinating.
So when you look at it that way, then you start realizing, wait a minute, all three are interconnected. We are told that the meter was created in 1799, right? And it came out of France. And this decimal system that the rest of the world really uses and has, all but abandoned the imperial system is, superior in some way, right? Because it's easier to track. The multiples of 10 make it much easier to remember, right? Well, what's interesting about it is that multiples of 10 has some weaknesses associated with it. The multiples of 10 are numbers that are only divisible if you look at the number of factors of 10. There's only 2 and 5. Right? There's no other way to arrive at the number 10 except for 10 times 1 than 2 times 5 through multiplication. Well, you look at a number like 12 and there's more options, right? You've got 3 and 4 and 6 and 2 and 12 and 1, right? You look at 24, 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, 432.1 equals 24. And 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1 equals 10. So that's giving us proportions of the Philosopher's Stone, the base of 10, the height of 24, and the
But why is that
hypotenuse.
important for just like anybody watching this?
Because
why
it's
is
the
that important?
symmetry of the geometry. So geometry is not what you think it is. So most people think geometry is just this cool shape that looks kind of cool, right? But have you ever looked at like some geometric form and then sort of been transfixed on it for a little while?
Yeah, massively so. I mean, like Metatron or Flower of Life, any of these things. Is that what you mean, like sacred geometry?
What is it
or
that catches your eye on that?
I think the perfect symmetry, or it's almost like something that I know I can look at and I'll never fully understand it, right? It's almost like it's pleasing somehow to the eye, but you don't know why.
Well, in
I don't
Metatron's
know why.
cube is pretty amazing because every single possible shape in the universe that exists that's a regular form comes out of that one shape, just through its line.
Do you think anything happens from wearing it?
I think it's absolutely a powerful sigil. That it is the sigil of Metatron.
Because I have it in a
effect.
gold necklace and I never wear it, and I always wonder, like, if I wear that, does it have
I think
an
you should
effect?
try it.
Okay.
The Flower of Life does the same thing because the Flower of Life is just a circular form of Metatron's cube. So all the Flower of Life, all you have to do to make it Metatron's cube is to take the intersections and just connect all of them, or take the center points of every other circle on the Flower of Life, and it will create Metatron's cube. If you just connect those dots, it's a very simple exercise. But the reason I mention this is because geometry is a QR code for your subconscious mind.
Wow.
So every time you look at a new geometric form, nothing happens by accident. You see it on a street, you see it in a restaurant. That geometry is actually upgrading your subconscious mind and connecting your subconscious to your conscious mind to bring you into a new state of awareness, which is heart-brain consciousness or super consciousness.
So when people see it in plant medicine ceremonies out of nowhere, is that kind of, do you think, what's happening? Like a
Yes.
download? Okay.
It's a download. So you're basically in the plant medicine ceremony, you're into a frequency where you can tap into this field, this Akashic field of information, and the way the data is the information is being brought into your conscious awareness is through the geometric forms that you're perceiving.
Wow. Yeah, it's beyond like trying to analyze or think it. It's beyond mind.
You don't even need
Yeah,
to
it's just
understand
a
what
download.
it is. You just have to perceive it.
Yeah.
It's like the 100th monkey, right? 100th monkey effect. You had monkeys that lived on an island. They figured out how to wash their food one way, and then when scientists started reviewing what
Right.
happened, they
The
figured out
kids,
that
right?
Yeah, they figured out that monkeys on other islands spontaneously started figuring out how to wash the food in the exact same way, and then monkeys all around the world started doing it. So as soon as it enters the awareness, it's like a rat that learns a maze, or a human being that breaks the 4-minute mile.
Dave Asprey talked about that in my first episode of this podcast.
Yeah, so you break the 4-minute mile, and then it changes the boundary condition
All of a sudden, like
on
12
what's possible. And then 12 people do it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And because what's really happening, the only real obstacles to our lives are the ones we persistently believe in and hold on to. The limitations that we have are all self-imposed, self-inflicted.
One of the most interesting things that I've ever heard you say, and I think it kind of ties into this, is how you believe with the pyramids that there are certain things that have always been there. We've walked by them 1,000 times and no one has seen it because our consciousness wasn't ready to see it. And as we get further and further into our consciousness and into this new age that we're going to of awakening, more things will be illumined within the pyramids that were always there, but we just couldn't even see them, right?
Yeah, it's funny, I didn't even know about this until a few months ago. One of my followers sent me, several of them actually, sent me video of Dolores Cannon.
Yeah.
So Dolores Cannon was, she passed away about 10 years ago, and She's like this grandmotherly
Yeah.
woman
So
who
quaint.
says
Yeah.
amazing stuff, but it's like crazy profound stuff that comes out of her mouth.
Yeah.
And she was a hypnotist who did past life regressions on people, and then she would record those regressions, and so that's the way she got her information.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so one of the things that she said through one of those sessions of, this hypnotic regression session she was doing on past life regressions for her patients was that hidden things were hidden in the walls of the Great Pyramid. And nobody would notice them or see them until one day someone with the right codes and the right symbols,
Named
the
Robert
symbol had
Grant.
to match, the symbol had to match,
Yeah.
would perceive the things in the walls of the pyramid and use them in our day.
Wow.
She said this before 2014 when she passed away. Wow. And someone sent it to me. They're like, wait, this must be talking about what you found, because we have found the walls are covered in petroglyphs. They're covered in petroglyphs that tell a story.
What's a petroglyph for someone who doesn't know?
Petroglyph would be like a relief, like an etching into the walls of granite or sandstone, limestone that the pyramid is, right? And so we found that virtually every chamber has within it hidden things all over the walls that nobody noticed. Nobody noticed them at all. And this became the subject in part of my series on Gaia called Code X. Now when you see it, you can't unsee it. So if I showed you the stuff, you might not see it straight off, but then as soon as I tell you, okay, now here's where it is, now try to unsee it, you won't be able to unsee it. And you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, how the heck did that happen? That's the same thing with consciousness. As we raise our conscious awareness, things that were invisible to us before become immediately visible to us, and we cannot explain how or why. It's not that it wasn't there before, it was always there. It's just that we couldn't perceive it. It was George Bernard Shaw, I think, that said, talent is being able to hit a target that no one else can hit. But genius is being able to hit a target that nobody else can see.
Wow. Yeah.
And this is what actually the process of awakening does to us. We start to see things that other people simply cannot see. And Leonardo da Vinci says, the three types of people: those that can see, those who cannot see, and those who can see once they're shown by others that can. Right? And it just means that all of us have chosen different alarm wake-up times. Right? We've all chosen different wake-up points, some at 4 o'clock in the morning, some at 3 or 2. And maybe those are the ones that ended up getting burnt onto the stake. They're like burned on the stake and they've had to be martyrs and all this type of stuff throughout history. Well, now we're in a different stage and age. We don't have to worry about that as much, hopefully, knock on wood. But basically, all of us have different timelines with which to awaken. And music is a fundamental part of that. And 432 hertz, for someone that would say, oh, I can't, I think 440 hertz sounds better. It doesn't sound better. That's a falsehood. Believe me, I've listened to so many different types of music. I could say to you that 432 doesn't sound better to me. It doesn't sound worse either. 440 is the same thing. What the difference is it sounds more open. 432 sounds more open. I can't say it's better per se. It sounds more open, and there's an ethereal quality to it, like a portal is opening related to it. And then when you combine that with precise temperament, which is changing the space between the notes, then that starts to sound really beautiful. So I've got people that are reductionist musicians who would say, oh, I would like to take your precise temperament tuning and apply it to 440 hertz to see how it sounds. Go for it, They'll like it better too, because that does sound better.
Right.
It actually does sound better because the notes are more naturally separated instead of just using a 12-tet or equal separation like a cookie cutter, which is all based on the roots of 2. You take the 1/12th root of 2, the 2/12th root of 2, the 3/12th root of 2, and that defines exactly the position of every note in the music scale. But that's not the way music actually works. Everything in life is more like this, a little bit asymmetrical, or has this Fibonacci relationship embedded within it that's more natural flow. It's not just this cookie cutter thing.
Yeah.
And so as a result, people that listen to precise temperament tuning, I just read more than 150 comments on it by audiophiles, and not a single one of them was negative, and the vast majority were, this sounds way better. So I think it's the temperament that actually changes your perception of how to listen to the music, but you actually have to make the change in temperament. The good news is that we now have, thanks to the work of Tony Mazzotti, who took my work, he's an Italian audiophile and musician, he's a music theorist as well as Jason Martineau, who's in San Francisco at the Conservatory of Music. He's a professor there, and he wrote all the music sections of the book Quadrivium. So very, very brilliant guy. Thanks to their good work, we now have the Logic Pro and the Ableton, software that you could basically put into synthesizer or whatever and be able to play and work with precise temperament tuning. In fact, I had a musician just write and do this whole mix of music that he did as a DJ, and he had my voiceover in it, and it was all in 432, and it was a really good mix. And I was like, whoa, 432 precise temper tuning.
Whoa,
which
so
was
weird
very
you say
cool.
That. Okay, yeah.
It was very, very cool to listen to it. And now there's musicians all over the world. So if you just look up precise temperament tuning, temperament, so Temperment, on YouTube, you'll find tons of videos and stuff so you can listen to examples of what it sounds like. And I believe fundamentally it's an upgrade to your DNA.
Just hearing it.
Just hearing it. Just like just looking at geometry has an effect on us that can be profound. Just listening to the right geometric music, because music is just the geometry that we experience with our ears. And geometry is the music we experience with our eyes.
Wow, I'm going to do this tonight. Listen to it and look at perfect geometry.
And look at perfect geometry, and you'll start taking in the power. So that's my encouragement to you is look at geometry differently the next time you look at it. Just do it with a mindful attitude. It might just be like a hanging light sometimes in restaurants because they're popular now.
Yeah.
And you might see an icosahedron or a dodecahedron. Take in the wisdom of that form. The best meditative practice that I know is drawing geometry.
I've tried it before. It's
powerful, right?
It's powerful. I've done it with, I'm tracing the flower of life. Yeah.
Try it with a compass and straight edge and no measurement.
Wow.
It's a whole process. And I teach a course that's on YouTube. You can find it called Philosophical Geometry, where during COVID I taught everybody how to draw geometry, and I had like 50,000 students doing geometry drawing every day.
Whoa.
And that's when I started realizing the power of social media.
Good for you, yeah.
Right? There's probably more people doing geometry with me than in all the universities during the same time period.
Well, I'll tell you, I can talk to you about math, but I almost didn't get my degree in college because I did not want to take math, and all it was algebra, and I literally did everything, every possible class I needed, and I saved that last one. I did it on its own in the summer after I finished everything else, because I was just like, I need my full attention on this. I mean, that's how intimidated I was by even looking at math. But this makes it fun and interesting and has a story and a reason, you know what I mean?
I mean, more people probably had bad experiences with mathematics in school than any other subject. Let's be real, right?
Yeah.
I mean, people hate math.
Yep.
Some people absolutely hate it. But if you can hate something, it's just a mirror of love. And so what's happening now is people are going through this massive awakening, falling in love with math.
Yep.
And I get messages every single day. And the reason is simple. It's because when you learned it in junior high school, it was taught to each and every one of us, when we all learned it, without meaning. So math without meaning is just information. Math with meaning becomes divine communication. When you understand the power that is God's language, that we call mathematics, that it is the code that underlies all that is around us, and it has God's signature throughout all of it,
Wow.
then you start to realize you're communing with a divine source, and that divine source is just another aspect of you that you didn't know existed or that you could even communicate with, but you can.
So what does it mean when you say in December you're going to tune the pyramids?
So if you think about music, the way you would represent it geometrically, which I just told you, that geometry is the music that we experience with our eyes. So we experience music with our ears normally, right? If you're like, experience music with my eyes? What the heck is that? Or in opposite sense, you could say that music is the geometry we experience with our ears. So they're just two opposite ends of the same expression, but it's still the same expression. like two sides of one coin, still being one coin. So I started to look at, how is it that music is expressed in geometry? And I realized that it's the simplicity of right triangles. And the way it works is that if I wanted to find a musical interval, which defines each note, so you could say that, this is all the work that I do in precise temperament tuning and in music theory. You could say that, the middle of a scale is going to only be reference to the unison value of the scale. So let's say you start with 432 for note A, right? And then you know that the next octave up would be what? 864, right? 432 times 2. And the middle of that scale between the two is going to be related to the square root of 2. So you take the square root of 2 and multiply it by 432, square root of 2 being 1.4142.
Okay.
And then you'll end up with a value that's like 611. So 611. So now you've got a scale that starts at 432, you've got the middle of the scale of 611, and you've got the top of the scale, which would be the next octave up of 864. See how that basically goes like that?
Yeah.
And then you can populate each one of these other notes within that using major thirds and perfect fifths and something called the circle of fifths to create a whole scale around it. So then you would have, A, then B, then C, then C sharp, then D, then D sharp, then E, then F, and then F sharp, and then G, and then G sharp, and then A, and then A sharp, and then B, and then you start with C again, right? Or you start with A, because we started with A, and we end with A, and you're going to the next octave up. So with that, I started realizing that the best way to depict this is a very simple formula that can be easily visualized. And it's that you simply would take the intervals, which are going to be tied to mathematical intervals of simple numbers, like a 3, 4, 5 triangle. You might remember in Pythagorean theory, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, right? If the only thing you remembered out of geometry was that, it's probably the most important thing to remember, because the entire universe is built on that relationship. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. This is the Pythagorean theory. So the way it works in music is you would take the height of an isosceles triangle, right? So the height of it, you cut the isosceles triangle in two, so you've got two right triangles. So you've got the height, and then you've got 1/2 the base of the original isosceles triangle. That becomes the musical interval.
Wow.
The height over 1/2 the base. Now to find its inverted interval, which would be like the inverted interval of a perfect fifth is the perfect fourth, because 4 has to equal, 4 plus 5 equals 9, and all of them have to add up to 9. So if you wanted to find the inverted interval of a third, it would be a sixth, because 6 plus 3 equals 9. If you wanted to find the inverted interval of a seventh, then it would be a second, right? So 2 plus 7 equals 9. So 5 plus 4 equals 9, 6 plus 3 equals 9, 7 plus 2 equals 9, and that's the entire musical scale, right? This is the way it works.
Okay.
So you start with the square root of 2 in the center, and then you just multiply by the unison value each of these interval values. Well, it just turns out that the exact intervals would create, first of all, 2 over 1, which is going to be at the center of the scale, so the square root of 2 over 1. And then the next one, which is going to create the perfect fourth and the perfect fifth relationships, would be what we call 4 over 3. So 4 over 3 is 1.33333. Then to find its inverted interval, you just simply take the full base instead of half the base, take the full base over the height. And that gives you the inverted interval. So then you would have 4 over 3, its inverted interval becomes 6 over 4, which is 3 over 2. That's the perfect fifth. So I started noticing, what if I start to look at the slope angles of these particular isosceles triangles, right? And what they would form for the perfect fourth and fifth, the other pairing, the major third, the minor sixth, etc., and just continue to do that all the way through. Well, that's when I noticed a very, very strange phenomenon. Because I noticed that the exact angles for the first pyramid at the center turns out to be 51.85 degrees. And then I noticed that the next angles for the perfect fifth and the perfect fourth, turned out to be 53.13 degrees. And then I noticed that for the next one, the angle for the major third and the minor sixth turned out to be 51.34 degrees. Well, those three angles happen to be the precise angles of all three pyramids on the Giza Plateau.
Whoa.
Exactly. And if they were off 0.0001, it wouldn't work.
Wow.
The best way to depict it would be to make pyramids.
Whoa.
With those exact proportions, with those exact slope angles.
Whoa.
So what we're actually looking at when we look at the Giza Plateau is 8 out of the 13 musical intervals embedded just within the first 3 pyramids.
Whoa.
The chances of that happening by coincidence are ridiculously small, right? So what that means is that each pyramid might actually have a note that activates it and that it tunes and resonates to.
Whoa. Okay, what does activating it, do you think, do for it and for the world?
So what I can tell you is what I've experienced when I've gone inside the pyramid. So if I go into the pyramid, in the Great Pyramid, there's a antechamber. You go through the Grand Gallery, which is this 147-foot long thing that's 26 degrees angle, and so it's like a big staircase, but there's no stairs. And you're like climbing up this thing, and it's a bit of a workout to get up to the pyramid, the King's Chamber. You know, you're getting to almost the midpoint of the Great Pyramid, which would be about 240 feet from ground level, and most people start off going down into the subterranean chamber, which is another, you know, call it 300 feet.
Is that the Queen's Chamber?
No, it would be the subterranean. So there's one that's deep underground, and then there's one that goes in the Queen's Chamber, which would be kind of right when you get to the base of the Grand Gallery, and then you go all the way to the Grand Gallery, and when you get to the top of that, you get to the Great Step, and then there's a corridor you have to bend over that's 1 meter high exactly. And that 1 meter high corridor, like you come out into the King's Chamber.
Wow.
So you have to kind of slouch over for like 24 feet. It's 23.14 feet. So what I noticed when I first went in there is that there's this, along the journey of that 23.14 feet, there's this crawl space. Not really crawl space, because you can sort of just hunch over. It's like the height of a bar, right? It's like 39 inches high. And as I was walking through there, I noticed that there's 2 sections where you can actually stand up fully. So there's openings, and these are called the antechambers, right? So the antechambers, both of them have this characteristic where they do like a sound cleansing on you. So as soon as you go in there and you just do this exact noise that I'm making right now, and not louder than this, then the whole thing goes wah, like super loud. Whoa. Like super loud. It freaks everybody
Do you
out.
think that's just realigning everything in you?
Oh yeah. Well, that exact same note when you lay in the sarcophagus. So you've done this, you've gone through the antechamber, you've got this sort of like energetic shower. It's like a saging almost. That's what it feels like when you go through it. And then you go into the King's Chamber, you lay in the sarcophagus, and you do the same note. And then it goes wah, 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 like this loud engine. It turns on.
In the King's Chamber?
In the King's Chamber. And it's loud. Whoa. And thousands of people have experienced this. It's not just me.
Wow, so you're calling that like turning it on, right? Like activating
Oh yeah.
it. Whoa.
So you realize that there's a musical note to it. And the note that activates it while you're laying in the sarcophagus and in the antechamber happens to be 117 hertz. 117.7 hertz. It's the exact resonance frequency of the chamber.
You measured that?
Yeah, we measured it. There's little apps that measure these things for you. So what's interesting about this is that the pyramid, as soon as you start realizing the sound relationship, you start feeling like, first of all, it looks like a giant musical instrument. There are gables on the walls in the Grand Gallery that look like they're directing sound. The same is true inside the Queen's Chamber. They look like they're directing sound. The King's Chamber and the Queen's Chamber and the Great Pyramid in totality does not look like something that is many thousands of years old. It looks like a modern construction.
Really? Which is kind of like what you say about is like the future is the past, you know, like I love the way you talk about it that way. There's been like 10 times already that I've wanted to interrupt you. I'm showing very good restraint.
Yes, you are.
I'm just like, let me at him. I have so many questions.
Yeah.
So, okay, I do want to ask though about because when I think the very first time I ever discovered you was probably 2020 or something. And I remember sharing this video with a lot of people and I was like, look, it's 3 hours long, but I promise, watch it. And it was like a lecture you were doing about the King's Chamber and the relationship to Da Vinci's painting, The Last Supper. And that was mind-blowing.
Yeah,
because then you go the extra step, and obviously I would love for you to explain it, but not just what you discovered within the chamber, but then to go the extra step of retracing, well, was Da Vinci ever in Egypt? Because that was not a known thing.
Well, that's my series on Gaia. My series on Gaia is called Code X, and it's exactly about this story.
But there was a lecture that you did, I remember, it was like a 3-hour lecture. I mean, you're like at a whiteboard or something. It was not Gaia the first time I watched it.
I've done several lectures, so I mean, I've done so many.
Yeah.
I think I might be, let me see, I wonder if it was the one I did at Resonance.
But we can talk about Codex because all that info was in there.
All the info's in Codex.
And like well done.
I did 16 hours of lecture after Codex as well called Divine Encryption. And I'm very happy to let you know, you're the first to hear this, that my next season, which is going to be called Codex Metatron Revealed,
Wow.
is going to be filming in January. And I just went through this full session and everything regarding it, and I'm super excited about it. It's going to be mind-boggling to everybody. But what we're finding is that each of the pyramids represent these different musical notes. We've never sung these notes, these exact notes. You know, we talk about the keys of Metatron, the keys of Peter, the keys of Melchizedek. These keys, maybe they're just musical keys.
Well, you know, and this is kind of a sidetrack, but mantras even, some of them are not just so powerful as you know, but some of them are secret. And they don't, and there's like yogis who are 120 years old or more in the Himalayas who know these secret mantras. And the reason I say this is the necklace I'm wearing, which people ask me about all the time. I don't think I've ever told the story, but there's a Rudraksh, or Rudraksh. It was given to me by, I had a very close family friend who died, or a close friend of mine in 2020. He was the personal Ayurvedic teacher for Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, the Dalai Lama. I mean, amazing man. The way his son and I became friends. Krishna gets this secret mantra from his dad's master, who's 120, lives in the Himalayas. And he's in his early 20s. I think he's like 21 or 22. The disciples of this guru are angry and they're like, we've been with you for 40 years. We never got this mantra. That's how powerful these sounds are, right?
Yeah.
And he said to them, Krishna's been with me for lifetimes, right? And that's why he's getting the mantra now. So he gets this mantra. He's doing it in the Hanuman temple, which you saw my shrine in there earlier.
The monkey god, right?
Yes. He's doing this mantra that he got in the Hanuman temple. And he gets a download that he's supposed to give me a Rudraksha. So it takes him a year because he has to find out where in Nepal to get it, because he lives in India. The real ones are in Nepal. They'll charge you thousands of dollars in India, and it's a little one, and half the time it's fake. So he finds out where in Nepal to get it. Then he had to it had to have the number of lines based on my astrological chart. So a famous 98-year-old astrologer tells him, get him one with 14 lines. So he gets me one with 14 lines. Then the last step is to activate it at this one temple in Nepal. But the guy is elected. It's like basically like the Vatican elects the Pope. It's a very important tradition in Buddhism, and the prime minister chooses this person. But they only do this ceremony for dignitaries. Well, Krishna goes to this temple. The guy happens to have been a client of Krishna's father. So he says, of course I'll do it for you. And he activates it. So then the day he gives it to me, my company got dissolved. All these things happened. I moved back to California. I'd been living in Texas for 2 years. Like my whole life flipped upside down the day he gave it to me. And they call it the tear of Shiva because it's destruction, things that aren't serving you in life. My entire life changed, but in a beautiful, loving, in my perspective, like forgiveness. Oh, this part of my life is complete. Now we're on to the next phase of the lesson of the curriculum. But it all happened that day. And it all stems from this one secret sound that he was chanting in a temple.
Well, it's like the song by Leonard Cohen, right?
The major fifth and the whatever, hallelujah.
Yeah, exactly.
As you were saying major fourth, but I was thinking that song in my head.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the secret chord that pleased the Lord, the minor fall and the major lift.
Jeez.
The baffled king composing hallelujah. So, and that's such a beautiful line from the song.
Chill. Yeah.
Because it's as if, when it talks about the baffled king composing hallelujah, it's like the king is composing this without even knowing the significance of it, like encrypting it through the higher self that's guiding his hand invisibly without even his knowledge, until later on he realizes how significant it is. Once you realize, until you realize that you're in a game of your own making, it can be a hell. But the moment you realize that you're in a game of your own making and all of it is to reveal to you this higher knowledge you wanted to learn through experience, not by didactic learning, and that maybe the entire reason for all of us is to observe the universe through our eyes so that the universal one is able to experience through its own separation all of our unique individualized perspectives and emotional states. And it's an incredibly beautiful realization when you have that. But once you realize that you're in this game, then you can learn how to play it.
Yeah.
And once you learn how to play it, then you're embodying the level of the game that Hindus refer to as Leela.
Whoa,
the
wait,
divine
so can you
play.
say that again?
Once you learn how to play the game, then you start to embody the stage of the game that Hindus refer to as Leela, the divine play.
Yeah.
When you can play within it, and you're no longer, completely jolted about
Yes.
by all of the suffering and challenges and stuff that you experience in the world. And it doesn't mean to say that you don't feel empathy.
Yes,
because
exactly.
most definitely you do. If you're truly in a place of Leela, two things happen to you. You start to release the judgments. You'll always still have some, right? But you literally largely let go of judgment. And then the second thing that happens is you start to fall in love with the experience. The game is fun.
It's so true.
It's a fun game. And the third thing that happens is you start to experience extreme empathy for the people in the game that are just different stages.
Yes.
It doesn't mean you could say, oh, it's all fake, I don't need to worry about this now.
Exactly.
The opposite is actually the case. And we're here to learn how to transcend this matrix of duality and to be authentic amid the illusion.
Yes. Yeah. I wonder, because I know you've talked about it before with other people having, past lives in Egypt. I also don't think it's an accident, because I remember when I watched that video that I was telling you, that first lecture that I saw of you being like, if I'm not going to Egypt, I refuse. In fact, I've had 2 opportunities since. I'm like, unless I go with him. Like, that's the only way I'm going to go. And then I actually told a friend of mine, Jennifer Sodini, who had gone with you years ago. And she was like, I know exactly that tour guide. If you ever want to connect. And I was like, but I have to go with Robert Grant. Like, I'm not going, you know what I mean? Even if it's the same tour guide.
Yes.
But when Shaman Durek was here, something really fascinating happened. I had a friend years ago who did a past life regression and saw her life in Egypt. She was a high priestess. She was stabbed in the back in the Nile. She turns around and it's her dad in this life they have an estranged relationship. They don't talk. He's in another country. She's in this country. They don't talk. So very much like patterns repeating in a certain way. We do his podcast together. This is like 3 years ago or 4 years ago. And he says, hey, do you mind if I check the Akashic records? Because you two go way back. And we go, sure. He says, yeah, he says to this girl, he says, you were a high priestess in Egypt. You were stabbed in your back in the Nile. And Frank, me, in that life, I was the son of the Pharaoh. She was the high priestess who would travel with us everywhere we went. And he says, and Frank, you saw it happen and you were screaming and you were crying because it was far and you couldn't do anything. And so he basically reaffirmed exactly what we had already heard in the past life regression. A year after that, we go to Mexico. We meet randomly. We were not planning it. An Akashic Records reader named Pilar. And she basically adds to that story. She tells us the same story, but then adds to it. She says at the end of that life, you were in this room, a chamber, and you were with the king, like some leader who was in charge of everything. And he was saying, we're going to hide all the technology. The future won't know about it, things like that. And she said, the two of you knew that he was lying, and you knew the entire time what was going on and what was happening, but you didn't speak up and you didn't say anything because you knew it was all perfect and it's all part of the divine order plan of what needs to happen in the world. You know what I mean? The experience, like you said earlier, the collective experience we're supposed to have. But it was interesting that 3 completely random experiences, past life regression, a shaman, and an Akashic Records reader, all 3 told us the same story.
Yeah. Well,
that's not a question, I just wanted to share.
no, I mean, I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
I think that's what's happening right now as we go through this transition, as well as all of planet Earth is going through this transition. People are starting to remember, because as soon as we start to transcend duality, the ultimate duality itself is time. Right? So think about time. Time is separated into past and future, and then there's now. And you could say that if I took a circle and split it in two and then rotated it very rapidly and gave it spin, it would look like a yin-yang. Well, the line and the point at the center is going to be now, but actually all of it's now because it was now just divided. So when you think about duality, duality has its foundational basis in the square root of 2. It relates to this separation of two-ness. So it comes back to the tetractys. On one side you have two-ness, on the other side you have three-ness. The entire scale is built on 3/2, which is the perfect fifth. It's also it's related to the Khafre pyramid. And it's inverse, right, which is going to be 4/3. And in addition to that, what you now recognize is that the square root of 2 creates the duality, but the square root of 3 creates the trinity and divine aspect. So when you add the square root of 2 plus the square root of 3, it equals pi. It's the completion of the circle. And that square root of 2, which is perceived as lead by all of us, because it's creating this separation. I'm separate from you, you're different from me. I'm going to judge the aspects of you that I don't like about myself, right? Then what happens is we can often forget the divine aspect of it. But when we include the divine aspects, we have a reference point to put it against. Then the amount of the circle that is comprised by the square root of 2 is 161.8 degrees, which is the golden number.
Whoa.
The square root of 2 is this ugly thing that when put together with the square root of 3, which is the divine aspect, then turns the square root of 2 of lead into the golden number.
There's alchemy in there somehow. I can't figure it out.
That's alchemy.
Yeah.
No, it's what it is. So if you take the square root of 2 is 1.4142, and you add it to the square root of 3, which is 1.732. The square root of a number is essentially its essence. So think about if I was going to bring you down to your spirit value, take away your body, the eternal aspect of you is your spirit, right? Your soul aspect. That's going to be an infinite number. And what I see on you on the outside is this reduction, right, to materialism. That reduction to materialism is going to have some number associated with it, but its spirit is infinite, and so it's not a finite number. It takes its square root, and then therefore it has an infinite decimal extension. It never stops, right? The square root of 2 goes on forever, right? It never stops. So we have the essence of duality in the square root of 2. You could say devilishness. And that is the diminished fifth in music. It's devilishness. That's what we say when we hear the sound of the square root of 2 turned into music. And the square root of 3 sounds divine. So when you put the two together, they both add 1.732 and 1.4142 equals 3.146, which is very close to pi. But the amount of the circle that's occupied by the square root of 2 in degrees is 1618.
Wow.
161.8 degrees. It becomes golden. The lead turns to gold. It is alchemy.
It's alchemy.
And so the tetractys, and you asked about 432 in the beginning, right? It's just giving us the definition of this pyramid of sorts. So if you were an ancient dweller and someone who wanted to encrypt through time a message to people about this higher knowledge of music, this higher knowledge of geometry, this higher knowledge of ascension, then the only way you could probably encrypt it through time is to build it in structures made of the hardest stone.
Wow.
Right? That would then give you, through its proportions, the cipher to decrypt the whole message. The Giza Plateau, and not only Giza, it represents the throat chakra of the earth, right? It's the throat chakra. So that's why the pyramids only show up in northern Egypt, because the rest of the Nile are the lower chakras. The throat chakra starts in Saqqara and it goes up, and there are 3 levels of it. There's self-awareness, which is the Great Pyramid. Khafre Pyramid is self-actualize, being able to manifest. And then the Menkaure Pyramid is self-transcend. It's when magic returns. So each of these pyramids has a different note associated with them that we know the exact precise frequencies for now.
Which ones are you tuning?
All 3 of those pyramids, and this is the global activation of the final pyramid on the Giza Plateau, which is Menkaure, which is basically the magic layer. So anytime you see a movie like Lord of the Rings, and there's Gandalf the Grey turns to Gandalf the White, whenever more magic comes into the land, more darkness comes into the land as well.
Yeah.
That's when the orc army shows up. Well, the same is true with what's happening in the world right now. The light needs the darkness as much as the darkness needs the light. You cannot have a more brilliant diamond and be able to perceive the brilliance of that diamond without the very dark backdrop of the velvet cloth that you put behind it. The night is always darkest just before the dawn. So that is what is happening in this transition right now.
Oh, just before the dawn. Yeah, that makes sense. Because I feel like in this new age, maybe less darkness.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
but what will happen is it's that the darkness is not going to no longer exist. The duality will always continue to exist.
Yeah.
It's a fundamental aspect of this universe. For every action, there must be an equal opposite reaction. And this will not change in the new era. It's just that for those people that are living in higher consciousness, they will have basically this entirely different experience where even the bad things that happen to them, they'll start realizing are divine. And they'll see the rest of the world still plunging into this duality perception as if they're in some sort of like, crystal looking at the outer world. And it's existing, but it's not touching them. It's just part of the backdrop of perception.
But in that reality that they're in, right? Do you see it as, the way I've always felt it coming is like, there will be more open magic, more open communication.
Absolutely.
Right? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We'll have telepathy returning.
Yeah, telepathy is coming strong right now.
Yeah, it's coming in strong because
Yeah.
it's the other thing we're going to do is we're activating the crown chakra pyramids, which are 8 kilometers north of Giza in another pyramid complex that sits 300 feet higher in elevation. 2 hertz and precise tempered tuning, multiply it by the ratio of the height to the base of the pyramids. That gives you the exact slope angles for each of the pyramids. And the ones that were missing as a result of what's missing on the Giza Plateau are found and completed on the ones in Abu Rawash. These pyramids are called the Jed pyramids or Jed Efre pyramids, like Jed pillar, raising the Jed pillar, the 2 snakes, getting to the knob of the staff of Hermes, which is the staff with 2 wings or the sword with 2 wings, right? And the feathered serpent that comes as a result of that. The Jed, raising the Jed, is getting to this stone that actually gets formed inside our brains when we achieve heart-brain coherence. When we achieve heart-brain coherence, we have a stone that grows in our heart. That stone is actually an amber stone. It's a crystal. And Buddhist monks, when they die and they cremate the bodies, they search the ashes for the ring cell stone. So they'll find these little beads or sometimes a whole stone that is left because that's the one part of the body that didn't burn.
In the heart?
In the heart.
Interesting.
So if you go to Dalai Lama's palace, which I've been, in Dharamsala, they have these little jars that hold all these little amber crystals within them. And then I asked, what is that? Oh, they don't keep all the ashes of someone who died, a high lama. They only keep the ring cell stones. The same thing forms, but it's a tiger's eye crystal that forms in the hypothalamus or thalamus inside the brain, in the wedding hall.
An actual tiger's eye?
An actual tiger's eye.
Wow, that's one of my favorite stones. That's so weird. I'm so drawn to them anytime I see someone wearing tiger's eye.
So the tiger's eye and the crystal in the brain represents the future. The crystal that's formed in the brain allows a portal into experiencing time differently. So once you start transcending duality, you're no longer perceiving good and evil in the same ways that you did before. You're actually recognizing it for what it is. It's all from divine source. Then the kalindra, or this stone that forms inside the center of the brain, the knob on the staff of Hermes, right? The top of the kundalini, right? Then when the energy comes up the chakras and you end up with this heart-brain coherence.
Wow. I want to ask about 2024. There have been people like my astrologer, who's incredible, who will tell me what's going to happen in 2024 on as much as he can, right? Sri Ravi Shankar, I think it was, who said will be open alien communication starting in 2024, where it won't be a hidden thing anymore. So many different sages and masters are saying that it's the year where truths will be revealed that were hidden for a long time. Anything that was not just hidden, but was a conspiracy or, we weren't sure about, all that comes to the surface in 2024 is what I keep seeing and feeling. And then in 2027, which I can go into crazy detail about, is like when this kind of awakening happens. So maybe like what you're doing at the pyramids starts a ripple effect, but apparently in 2027 is like, wow, seeing things that we did not know was possible. But 2024 is like the beginning of all that. How do you see it?
24 is a divine number. Every prime number, and I discovered this and published it in a paper that's on the Cornell site, archive.org.
Really?
And basically, the title of the paper is Infinite and Accurate Prediction of Prime Numbers Using a Novel Quasi-Prime Methodology. This type of number that I discovered. And my partner and I, Talal Gwanem, who is a professor at universities, and left the university environment after I met him, and I said, look, you need to just leave academia and come work with me. And so we've been working together for almost 10 years now.
Wow.
But basically 24 relates to prime numbers. Here's how. Every prime number larger than 3 squared becomes a multiple of 24 plus 1. So 5 times 5, 5 is a prime number larger than 3, equals 25, and that's 1 times 24 plus 1. 7 times 7 is 49, and that's 2 times 24 plus 1, right? Then the next prime number is 11. 11 times 11 is 121. That's 5 times 24 plus 1. And then 13 times 13 is 169, and that's 7 times 24 plus 1. You see the pattern?
Yeah.
So 24ness is the foundational basis of a structure of space-time. A cuboctahedron is a geometric structure that has both triangles and squares on it, right? And it has 24 edges. If you flatten that 24 edges down into a two-dimensional structure, it will be like a wheel of 24. The Egyptians were big on 24.
Oh, I'm wondering what happened in 1924. I'm going to go look that up.
So 24 is a really, really important number. So you can go back through history and you can point to things that happened, you know. So 24 years ago was the year 2000. Obviously, you know, it was a very important year in the world consciousness, Y2K, and all the stuff that was happening back then. There was already mergers of big media. The internet was starting to really take off in a major, major way then. 2012, we know how important that was. So now we're a full octave up from 2012 in a way. We've basically doubled it, right? So 12 goes to 24. So that has some significance because it's like you got a new scale. You're into the next cycle. We're solidly now into the next cycle. So that's a big difference. But 24 has a divine aspect to it. And the 24th letter of the alphabet is the letter X. And we all keep seeing X everywhere.
Like Codex, yeah.
Like code X.
Yeah.
Right? And there are 3 sets of numbers that are pairs of numbers that have a very unique property that I would call super numbers or divine numbers. One of them is 137 and its palindrome 73, right? 73.1 or 73. The other is 57.1 and its palindrome 175, right? And the difference between those two numbers is exactly like 137 divided by 57.1 is 2.4. 24 is what connects them. These are what I call double palindromes, where they're inverse values. So 1 over 137 equals 73. And 1 over 42 equals 24, or 0.024. And 1 over 175 equals 57.1. And these are math constants that are used in physics. And Richard Feynman, the very famous physicist, said that we don't know how God pushed his pencil, but he pushed his pencil on that number 137 and 73 because it's the veritable separation of light from darkness. It's the threshold energy required to make an electron either emit a photon or absorb it and bounce to a higher electron shell. It is the mirror of consciousness. So seriously, alpha chi omega is a math equation that comes out to 1.000.
It's wild.
That's wild.
Yeah,
right?
it is.
So when you think about that, you start thinking about the number 24. Well, 24 also relates to 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1 equals 10, but 4 times 3 times 2 times 1 equals 24. 24 is this 24,000 year cycle. So the knowledge of our 24,000 year cycle and how it actually operates and how the past becomes the future and the future becomes the past in this cyclical time is going to be coming to our mass awareness over the course of the next few years, really commencing in a major way in 2024. That represents the entry into the 5th dimension, which is represented by the throat chakra, the 5th chakra. The throat chakra, which is represented by the Giza Plateau.
Wow.
So what's going to happen in 2024? a massive solar flare, many believe, in a major way starting this next year. It's already been bouncing around, but it's going to really become very significant, culminating in what is predicted to be a pole shift towards the end of this decade.
Okay, which is that like mass floods and this and that, or no? Is it just more on a consciousness, energetic level?
It can have mass floods.
Okay.
And I believe that this is something that's happened probably every 6,000 years of the 24,000 year cycle. Because Sri Yukteswar,
The Holy Science.
who wrote the Holy Science, and I don't think he's wrong, said that the precession of equinox is not 26,000 years, but 24,000 years. And the reason for it, I can explain mathematically, is simply mass time dilation. As we get closer to our sister star, whatever that gravitational pull has on us has an impact on our time. So therefore, on one side of the cycle, it's very fast, and on the other side of the cycle, it's slower. The average between the two, one end of it's 26,000 years or 25,920, and the other end of it's 22,000 years. The average between the two is 24,000 years. And that's the cycle of precession. It's Orion traversing through, the hunter traversing through the entire precession of equinox and learning all the different zodiacs and their experiences that come along with them. And his shadow is Ophiuchus, the 13th zodiac sign, the snake tamer, which represents Asclepius as well, Bacchus. This is now the consciousness that's coming in. We are sitting here across from each other in the constellation of Ophiuchus. It's this week. So we're in Ophiuchus right now.
Astrologically?
Astrologically. Okay, it would go from November 8th until November 27th would be the period of Ophiuchus. We think of it as a Scorpio and probably Sagittarius overlapping. But actually, we're in the constellation of Ophiuchus. And I believe that Ophiuchus is just the shadow consciousness, the wisdom aspect of Orion. When Orion finally gets control over his Kundalini, no longer wants to conquer anymore. He sits just slightly below the plane of the ecliptic and the zodiac, and Ophiuchus sits just slightly above it. The two should be looked at as one. One is a subconscious mind, the other is the conscious mind. Ophiuchus sits, he's the sitting god who sits, he's an older person whose feet are resting on top of Scorpio. But it's definitely one of the constellations, and that is what's coming out of this. These are also musical notes that have to be brought into our awareness. Each of the constellations are literally musical notes, and our understanding of those musical notes, which in this case happen to be the sevenths, right, the Pythagorean sevenths of those interval values. And now that we now know what those true interval values are, it starts to come into our awareness, just like watching and looking at geometry raises our consciousness through this QR code effect. So like, we all went to restaurants during COVID and, we put our phone on there and you get the whole menu. Well, maybe that's what's happening. Maybe as we look at geometric forms, it's basically giving us the menu of what's going to happen in the next stage of our life.
I'm literally doing that tonight. I cannot wait.
So basically what's happening now is as we raise our consciousness, we go into greater wisdom. The next stage is just going into Sanctus Luminous, the Homo Sanctus Luminous, which is the divine light human being, which is what all of us have in our future, that we all decide at different times to do it. So not everyone is going to be experiencing this experience now because we didn't decide, all of us, to experience it now. But eventually, every one of us will. That's the beauty of this entire matrix simulation, divine simulation of mind and spiritual life simulation game, is that eventually all of us will win. And there's no one that's better than anyone else. Not any one of us is any better than anyone else. And so if you still believe that, that's ego.
Even the Dalai Lama would think a meth addict is equal to him,
That's right. And so that's why I just said, a truly humble person sees and perceives humility all around him or her.
Well, what's interesting when you said that is that the first line in A Course in Miracles is, "Welcome to A Course in Miracles. This is a required course. You get to choose when you take it." So their point is, because it sounds so arrogant, is like, look, you can awaken now or you can awaken in 10 lifetimes, up to you. You're going to eventually awaken. You can't do this forever, but knock yourself out. Do whatever you want. I'll be here when you're ready.
Yeah, and it's like the list of all the things before you come, which is like one of the things on the list is what you don't learn, you'll experience again until you do.
Yeah.
And that's what we all are experiencing until we finally realize that the things that we're experiencing is really just the things that we're judging. Then maybe we'll start to learn not to judge. And transcending beyond judgment means you start to enter into love because it becomes unconditional. That's why I said in the beginning that enlightenment to me, I believe fundamentally, is when my expression of love, if I can achieve this consistently, and I get glimpses of it, right?
Yeah.
But when my expression of love and empathy exceeds and supersedes my desire for one objective truth,
Yes.
then I know that I'm in the right path. That's when the synchronicities fly.
Yeah.
That's when everything starts to fall into place. And it doesn't mean that every experience I have is this perfect miracle, because it's not.
Yeah.
It's that I start realizing the negative experiences that I'm going through have a beautiful aspect as well. You know, every musical interval has its inverted value. And when we listen to it, when we watch a movie, they can change the mood of a movie maker, right? A filmmaker can change the mood of a movie just by changing the background music. So you know when you're going, just from the background music, when there's a scene change, you know when it's going to be going into a romantic
Or like,
type
oh my God,
scenario,
something's gonna pop up.
or something's
Yeah.
going to pop up.
Yeah.
They use different frequencies.
Yeah.
And what they're using is they're using these tried and true, tested frequencies that entrain our emotional states. So a major third becomes a romantic scene, but a minor sixth, its inverted pairing, becomes a heartbreak scene. It's all just music. That means it's all just geometry. That means that we've created it and it's perfectly timed to interact with us on the moment that we bring it into our consciousness and become the 100th monkey effect that then has an impact on everybody else in your larger universal experience of the one dividing itself into the many simply for the joy of seeing itself through all of our unique and different perspectives and then becoming one again.
Wow. Okay. I know I'm taking up your time, even though that's a construct of the mind. I just have one. Well, I want to ask about your app at the end.
Okay.
But right before that, one thing. You mentioned the solar flares and our sister star, right? Again, so weird because I've only asked this once before. And when I did, all the cameras shut off. Literally, it was two cameras, not three like this one. And they both said overheated. And it was when I asked the question about the sun. And the question, because I had this wild experience in my meditation that Jesus, when he said, I am the light of the world, or whatever, something around that, is not that I am the Son of God, S-O-N, but S-U-N. I am literally the Son. And I had this experience, I didn't know what it meant. It was kind of like between dream and wake. And when I woke up the next morning, I had this podcast and I asked the guy and all the cameras shut off. But it was basically, our place in the solar system is so profound. And when you think of even astrology, right? Like I don't go by Western astrology because they're using the Catholic calendar. I go by Vedic astrology, which is looking at the actual stars, which is what astrology is. And
By the way, the fifth dimension is in Vedic.
really?
Yes.
Okay.
So whatever you were, as soon as you transit into higher consciousness, that's when you go. So you could say that the way that the zodiac works, until when you're in the fourth dimension, lower dimension, until you perceive it, you'll be in whatever like zodiac sign that would be your sun sign, your north node, your moon, right, your rising sign, etc. Then now, once you go into higher dimension and you start choosing love over judgment, then all of a sudden it shifts into your Vedic sign. So for me, I don't change much because my sun sign in the tropical system is the same. I'm Taurus. But my moon goes from Gemini also into Taurus. So it does shift.
Oh, your sign is the same in Vedic?
Yes.
That's so interesting because that's a very rare small. I think
You have to be at the end of the current like tropical month of your zodiac
what's
in order to
interesting?
basically be the next one as well.
So sorry to interrupt. That was rude. I realized 24 degrees. You said 24 earlier. And as you said that they're the same, my astrologer says Western astrology is off by 24 degrees.
Yep. That's the 24.
Whoa.
Whoa.
Wow.
That's the 24 that shifts. And so when you think about it, there's 360 degrees, right? In the overall circle right, of the
Yeah,
precession
yeah.
of the equinox and of course for the zodiac. So 24 degrees is going to be, basically that segment that breaks up, the number of times that it fits inside there. And it's exactly that. That's the reason for the 24.
Whoa.
Vedic becomes the higher order, higher dimensional aspect.
So if people want to have conversations like this and do it safely and discreetly and not worry that their coworkers are going to find out and think they're weird, they can do it now on your new app that I just saw you post about on YouTube, I think a few days ago, right?
On Orion.
Orion is what it's called?
Orion
Oh,
is what
I
it's
love
called.
that. Okay,
Orion
can you tell me
what it's called.
why
So-
this is different from, what's the other one that everyone uses now?
So, I mean, people use WhatsApp, they use Signal, they use all these different platforms, but all of them are data miners.
So they can sell your data.
They could sell your data. So I don't know if you probably use WhatsApp.
Yeah.
And on WhatsApp, a few months ago, maybe it was like 2 months ago, they sent around this message saying, oh, send a message to yourself so you'll never forget what you need to buy.
Your
in the
shopping list.
Right? It's like
What brilliant way to sell that to people who want to sell you things. Yeah.
exactly.
Wow. Yeah.
It's like, sucker. But
Right? Oh yeah, we're just trying to help you.
yeah, we're just trying to help you.
Wow.
Exactly.
How kind of Facebook to
Exactly.
think
It's
of
like-
me that
It's
way.
like the government. Yeah, we're here to help. Ronald Reagan said the worst words he ever heard in his life were, "Hi, I'm from the government. I'm here to help." It's like basically what it was. So I, in 2018, realized that the most valuable asset in the world was going to be our individuality. It's our information of our individuality, because the one consciousness divides itself into the many to perceive through all these different ways. We're not meant to be cookie cutters. We're not meant to be a stamp, right, of like a robotic stamp. We're meant to be human beings. And what I noticed was that with the advent of social media, we're all getting cattle prod into echo chambers of our own conditioned bias. And I have changed my viewpoint on so many things when I've had spirited debate with somebody else who, through their cogent and cognizant way of approaching an issue, were able to sway my viewpoint on things because of their reasoning, because of their heartfelt perspective as well. It's when the brain and the heart meet. It's like when the heart thinks and when the brain feels, the river of wisdom flows.
Wow.
When the heart thinks, which you don't normally associate with a heart to think, but when the brain feels and the heart thinks together, then the river of wisdom flows. And I truly believe that. And so free speech becomes such a critical aspect to maintaining our individuality. Enlightenment is not that we all go into some collective and become some hive mind robot.
Right.
No, Carl Jung refers to it as individuation. It's not that we lose our entire individuality.
Yes.
If anything, we start to express it in its entirety and authenticity.
That was my biggest fear when I first did ayahuasca, and we're talking 10 years. I mean, I've had 30 ceremonies, something like that, but I remember being like, and I remember thinking I was losing myself, and I'm like, I'm gonna have no personality because things in the world stopped affecting me, and I just felt like I'm becoming a zombie or a robot. Like I was so unaffected by everything, and then I realized, no, I just became more of who I am.
That's right. And so, until you had that realization, you might have been hiding certain aspects of yourself because of vulnerability, fear of vulnerability. The first thing Adam does in the Bible, in the Old Testament, is he covers himself because he says he's naked. So God says, who told you were naked? We always want to hide our vulnerability, and the first emotion that Adam felt was shame. And Adam was ashamed. The very first emotion. So what do? We start forming our personas based on shame, and we then turn the shame into blame. That's the natural aspect.
I feel shame because they're making me feel shame.
Yeah, it's like the woman that you gave me and commanded I remain with her, she gave me the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and I ate it. We immediately turn shame into blame. And vulnerability, we turn into occult. We hide it. Occult just means hidden, right? We hide it from the world. We place, fig leaves over our vulnerability, whatever that may be. And those are the things that we predominantly use as a sandbox to define what we are and what we are not to the outside world, and most importantly to ourselves. What is now happening is people are awakening to the larger selfness of themselves, realizing that all the things that they've been judging negatively and positively in the world around them were actually things that they themselves embody, because it is them, right? It's just a reflection of their consciousness. So if we go into this cookie cutter approach and we all think that everyone agrees with us. Oh, look, everyone agrees with me. I'm in this echo chamber because Facebook put me in this chat. Because of all of my data says this is what I would like. And the reason why they did that is not they, it's all just part of an overall consciousness that's deciding to experience this. But the reason why the companies that exist to do this, and they really do exist, is because then you get more dopamine. The more dopamine you get, the more engagement you get. The more engagement you have, the more longer you stay. The more hours you stay on the platform. So the only way I figured out to protect ourselves from losing our own individuation opportunity, which is truly enlightenment, when you can be your absolute authentic self and realize that you have value. We all know people that have gone through a spiritual path and they remain very, very judgmental. They're just in the early stage of the spiritual path. Narcissism is the doorway to higher awareness.
Oh, that's good to know.
Narcissism is just when you get to the point where you fall in love with this persona that you've created for yourself, but you actually loathe all the other aspects of yourself. It's not true self-love. It's only loving the projection you believe that you're projecting. So what this means then is that when we get into this stage of narcissistic behavior, it becomes so extreme that we wake up to it. And then we're like, this isn't working for me anymore. And the moment we have that realization of this isn't working for me anymore, and insanity is defined when we try to do the same things the same ways and experience and expect a different result. We're not going to get a different result. And that's when you finally have that introspective moment, and the thing that you thought was the worst thing that ever happened to you actually leads to the most beautiful alchemy that you could ever experience. That's your true awakening to your higher self, and that you are perfect just as you are. And when you finally can embrace that, then you can really enter into this notion of expression of love. But when I started realizing that the world was definitely moving towards this thing where individuality was going to be looked down and frowned upon, where free speech was no longer going to be expected in society, but actually completely trampled upon, that's when I started saying, okay, we need a new platform. And that's when we created Orion. And Orion is exactly that. It represents the throat chakra. Our tagline is free your voice. It's a completely free speech platform that allows creators, it's made for creators by creators, it allows creators to own their own communities and people to express themselves in their truest authenticity. And it's all on blockchain. So it can't be monitored, it cannot be censored.
Can't be sold.
It can't be sold. That's the beauty of it. If I died tomorrow and everyone in our company got wiped out tomorrow, it would still exist because it's a blockchain technology. That's the purpose of it. Blockchain allows a mechanism for the blockchain to continue to improve because people get paid in tokens, right, by making improvements to this. And so we created a messaging and social media platform on top of an incredible blockchain that has incredible governance built within it, true decentralization. And that messaging app platform is like a cross between Instagram, the messaging apps like Telegram and Slack. So, and Zoom. So all four of those amalgamated into one with all their capabilities. So the biggest difference is that it is quantum secure. So that means it is a post-quantum cryptography technology, which is the only one like this. That means even quantum computers can't crack it. It's been certified by NIST, the National Institute of Standards of Technology. No government can crack it either. And this is a very powerful platform for free speech, for freeing your voice. It also lets you have unlimited size groups. So the largest group you can have on a WhatsApp chat is about 1,024 people. This will allow you to have millions of people. It flattens borders. This will be a platform that my vision of it will be that you will actually be able to own fully all your own data. Eventually, we're adding into it a browser that is quantum secure encrypted, as well as a VPN that's quantum secure. And the VPN changes your IP address according to all the nodes on the network. Right? It's really a really,
How long
really
from
cool
that,
technology.
for that to happen?
About a year from that happening.
That's fast.
Not very far.
Can people get this now?
You can get the beta now. So we already have several people on the beta. We're like letting people more and more go in as we do more and more of our testing on it. People love it. I'm like super thrilled. We launched the beta on Friday, and already everyone's saying they love it. The interface is a beautiful interface. We're adding in things like telephone calls the middle of next year and Zoom meetings as well, unlimited number of people. And it's a really, really cool thing. And eventually, when the browser's in there as well, you'll be able to blockchain all of your data. So when you go to visit a website that asks for cookies, it'll still give the cookies, but they'll all be encrypted and they can't be read.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
It's like putting a fence on all of your data so only you own it.
So important.
And then that will allow you to decide if you ever want to sell it. You don't ever have to sell it. And we don't scrape any data whatsoever. It's a trustless architecture. You don't have to trust me. You don't have to trust the structure, right? The architecture is built already with all of these aspects of it built into the chain. And it's very fast. So it's not only quantum secure and encrypted, which makes it the most powerful encryption, but you can use this like a social media app.
It's incredible.
So Orion, go to just orionmessenger.io, right? orionmessenger.io. That's
So no, they can't get
ORIO.
this on the App Store. It's
You can't get it on the App Store.
Okay.
So I started looking at all this analysis and stuff, and I said, well, geez, other companies that have tried to do sort of offshoot platforms and everything, they got thwarted by the big infrastructure of big
course.
tech. Right? So Parler tried it, and they got basically blitzkrieged by Google, Apple Store. They just shut them off out of the
sense.
platforms. Once you're an Android app in the native environment, they can just shut you down.
Yeah.
You're just finished.
Yeah.
We're not on that at all. We're a PWA, which is progressive web app technology, which is only very recent.
Yeah.
That these are available. It looks and feels just like a regular native app, but it's not subject to any of the other big tech companies that would decide, oh, this doesn't fit their overall strategic plan.
So orionmessenger.io.
Correct.
I'll make sure to link that.
Yep.
Wow.
So go sign up for the
Yeah.
the beta, and then you'll get it. We've already got like around 10,000 people that
Just
are just
like that.
waiting right now. Oh yeah, it's growing very fast. And we've already got a lot of people on it that are loving it. And I'm waking up now, I get in there, because I'm moving my entire Telegram chat.
Yeah.
My entire Telegram, which I thought was an encrypted chat.
I've never been on Telegram because I knew it wasn't. A
It's
part of
full
me
of
was like,
bots.
there's no way.
It's
Yeah.
full of bots. It drives me literally batty.
Yeah.
They sell and scrape all your data.
I never got on it.
Right? And so the beauty of Orion, you don't need to even give, after the beta, we only need your email address, but you can make a new email address just for doing this. We only need your email address just so we can send you the link to get into it. It literally takes like 30 seconds or less to get onto the app. It's much faster than going to the Apple Store and downloading it. And then plus all the benefits that I just said about not
And
being...
using your email is totally fine, right?
Oh yeah,
As far as encryption, everything you've ever done on that platform will never go back to this one email.
That's right.
Wow.
No, so we don't even keep the email. We
It's
don't
just to get this
We have
link.
no way. We don't even keep the email. That's just only for the beta participants. After the beta is done, it won't even require that. You don't have to put an email address in. You don't have to put a telephone number in. Wow. And now you've got a telephone that can be used on any device. And you've got you could be used on computers. It could be used on, and because it's progressive web app, it works in every environment, and it looks awesome.
I can't wait to see it.
It's a beautiful one, and I'm actually super proud of our team because they made it really beautiful, and I mean notifications and everything come through it as well. It's very simple to use.
And I love the name Orion. You want to hear another synchronicity? I wrote in my phone the other day, I wrote, staring at the constellation Orion, pretending to be a star like him. I was just walking up and down here, and I just had that thought, and I wrote it down.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow. So yeah, this is what it looks like. So it looks a lot like...
it looks just like a text message.
It does.
Wow.
It looks just like, all the other type platforms.
Yeah, really clean. Yeah.
Super clean.
Oh yeah.
It's got all the taxonomies.
So these are
and
individual
everything.
with one other person, or are
No,
these
this
groups?
is a group. This has got 105 people in this group,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And so this is just my personal one.
Right.
But it literally does videos and I mean, it's got all the taxonomies that you would sort of expect with this. And the communities thing, the other thing you can do is you can look at it from a different view. It makes it look more like an Instagram. Like this.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Are these all different groups, or is this within that group?
This is that one
your
group. Yeah,
Oh
this is
yeah,
that
yeah,
one
yeah,
group.
yeah.
So it's very cool. I'm very excited about this. This is like, my vision is that one day communities will create economies on here because you can actually transfer funds back and forth.
I mean, the possibilities are endless. This is like the new way of life.
It's so exciting because there's no way to fact check it, which is really just another way of calling it propaganda. When you think about what's been happening, you could be your authentic self. And that's what this is all about. That's why our whole campaign is free your voice. And
It's great.
it's really fun to do it. I had this vision, you know, I wrote here today because one of the guys that used to work on my team who went through a massive spiritual awakening, he was an attorney. You know, he went to New York University, I think that's where, or Columbia, and he was our general counsel. And one day he comes to me and says, you know what, I'm going to leave being a lawyer. I don't want to be a lawyer anymore. He goes, I love working with you, but I don't want to be a lawyer anymore. I'm going to go administer, you know, frog medicine, toad. And so I'm like, okay, it's like, here we are, the combo, right. And I'm like, wow, what a new world we're living in, right? When you let this lawyer from Columbia does this, and he is on the app now. So this morning, and he left the company like 4.5 years ago, and he was at our first offsite where we wanted to bring data sovereignty to individuals in the world, to maintain their individuation, their individuality. And so today, I saw that he's on there. You know, he's one of these guys that even changed his name, right? He changed his name after he went through this awakening. And so he got onto the Orion chat and immediately says, wow, this is really cool. And so I asked him, I said, isn't it amazing how, you know, we thought about this back in 2018 and how far this has actually come, you know, from a vision to the actual reality of it. And that was just amazing because he wrote back and he said, he goes, wow, I'm amazed by how far this vision has come, right here.
Wow, yeah, wow.
And so, you know, I said, hey, remember when this was just a discussion, our first offsite in 2018?
I mean, look how ahead of if you were thinking about this 6 years ago, how ahead of the curve you were to know that this would be needed.
It was a download. And I also knew that all the encryption standards were going to break.
Oh yeah, total download.
It was
you and I are getting massively different downloads. Like my little pea brain, they're like, don't worry, we're not going to give you fractions, you know?
That's what Matthias Dent said in my podcast. He's like, you know, when I first started in school, I was really good in math. And then I started getting these downloads and I couldn't remember how to do 2 plus 2. He goes, so all of a sudden I asked my guides, why can't I do math anymore? And they just said,
Robert's
you don't need to worry about it. And then he goes, now I know why. Because now he sends me messages and he's like, what does this mean?
Yeah.
And so that's what we do. I will send him messages also and say, you know, this is what I'm seeing. How does this apply to energetics? How does it apply to the heart? And that's the exact embodiment of the heart thinking and the brain feeling.
Because you have the
logos.
The logos, and then he's got the memories.
The pathos of the memories.
So
I have my memories
combining
too.
that.
I have the memories. Oh, absolutely. I remember all my past lives.
All?
Actually documented 36 of them.
Wow.
So that may not be all of them.
No, yeah.
But I remember 36 of them very specifically. And it's constantly, I'll just be in a restaurant one day, I'll get a flashback and I'm like, okay, here's the other one.
Yeah.
And I remember who I was and where I was and what I was doing. And because it's not happening through time, it's happening right now.
It's all now. Yeah, it's the holy instant. It's like everything just happened but we experience it. It's mind-boggling. We experience it as like lifetimes and this and that, but it's all one instant.
That's right.
Wow. Well, hey, thank you so much. I have 100 more questions, so maybe another time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And is there anything you want to leave us with?
You know, I'll leave you with the quote from the Emerald Tablets, where it's from Thoth, and he says, "Time changes not, yet all things change in time."
Oof.
It's a deep, deep thought. The only constant that we have in this experience is change. It's our own evolution, and when we start to realize the things that we left and encrypted to ourselves through time, even the things that I drew. I actually, I'll leave you with this one story. I was in Miami and I met Matthias, and that was the first time we met in person. And the morning before I met him, I woke up and I had a dream. And I wrote a poem directly as I woke up, because it was literally like a channeled thing. And I was like, wow, this has some significance. So I'll read you this poem. And I think it relates to 2024. Lightning strikes. It actually relates to this year too. So from that point in time, which was in May, I think it was May 20th.
A
when
year.
I wrote this, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Lightning strikes, broken thunder, earth and child torn asunder. Think about all the children that we're all seeing in Gaza. How heart-wrenching that is. Lightning strikes, broken thunder, earth and child torn asunder. A seething bath while calamity boils, infestation to manifestation, lies to and from a nation. Hearts halt when men wage war. A man of old age and blunder, just a sinister wonder of ages no more. New ways of old returning as rushing waters, flooding the undulating valleys of all men's hearts. Mistaken courage and shattered dreams of past paradigm, the ticking clock of stolen moments. A lady of aeons awaits, submerged and yet so sublime. A world of maladies maladapted, the unsung song, the unkept keeping. A sovereign cure with a sovereign crown when Father Time returns.
Wow. Yeah. Very layered.
Extremely layered.
Yeah.
And these are the types of things that we leave ourselves. You know, when I went back and read this again just a few days ago, and at the time in May, I didn't understand why I was seeing children, right? I didn't understand what it meant to have lies to and from a nation, which is just another way of saying propaganda, right? I didn't understand what, you know, maladies maladapted meant, and I didn't understand what a lady of aeons awaits is a reference to, the lady of the lake.
Submerged but still sublime.
Submerged yet still sublime, and holding the sword of Excalibur. That's the story, the lady of the lake. So all of these things we don't even know, and the things that we don't say, the things we don't feel, we skip the rungs on the ladder of life. And yet at some point in time, all of us must return to touch every rung that we just skipped along our journey. Every feeling that we didn't allow ourselves to feel, we must go back and feel, and feel fully. And this is the transmutation. And in so doing that, we end up perceiving differently the experience of our life, to realize that it was the square root of 2 transitioning with the context of the square root of 3, the suffering that became the gold, the lead that turned to
Gold.
And the gold of our experience is what brings us to our realization of our own divinity. And it's the most beautiful journey we could ever be on. It's just waiting for us to recognize that that's exactly what it is, and to fall in love with it just the way that it is. Most people think that Earth is like an escape room that they have to get out of. The only way that we transcend this realm, this experience, is by falling in love with it just as it is.
Oh my God, 100%. Not just get out of it, but people also feel like they have to dominate it or win it. Or,
Control it.
Yeah, yeah.
Learn to surrender, learn to fall in love. Let the expression of love, love. It's time to let life live and let love, love.